Welcome to Storycraft Portal, where real stories meet raw emotions. Today, we begin a journey into the glittering city of Dubai, not to explore its riches, but to uncover a truth buried beneath silence. Maria Kovalchuk, a 20-year-old Ukrainian model, arrived in Dubai chasing dreams, beauty, and opportunity. But just days later, she vanished without a trace after attending a glamorous rooftop party. 10 days of darkness followed, until she was found, broken, bruised, and silent. Was it an accident, or is there something more haunting behind her fall? This is not just a news report. It's the voice of a soul lost in the lights. This is part 1 of Kogai Roshni, Maria Kovalchuk Ki Hakikat. Dubai, a city where dreams are made and lost in the blink of an eye. Maria Kovalchuk, a 20-year-old Ukrainian model, arrived in this glittering city with hope and ambition. On March 9th, she attended an exclusive rooftop party, surrounded by the glitz of fame and fortune. The night was filled with laughter, music, and selfies, but after the party ended, Maria disappeared without a trace. Her phone went silent, her social media went cold. Days turned into weeks, and her family was left in agonizing uncertainty. 10 days later, Maria was found, broken, bruised, and barely conscious on a remote road. What had happened in those lost days? Was it an accident, or something far darker lurking behind the city's glamorous facade? The search for Maria stretched on, each passing day more desperate than the last. Her friends and family reached out to everyone: the police, the hotel, even the social media platforms she'd once used to share her every moment. But every lead came up empty. No one knew where she had gone or who might have seen her after the party. It wasn't just her disappearance that haunted those who cared for her. It was the silence, the deep, suffocating quiet that followed. The city that had once promised her fame now felt like a labyrinth, each corner hiding another unanswered question. But then, after days of fear and uncertainty, a phone call came. The authorities had found her, but not in the way anyone had hoped. Maria was lying on a road outside the city, broken and battered, clinging to life. What had happened to her in those missing days? The news of Maria's discovery shocked everyone. When the police arrived on the scene, they found her in a state far worse than anyone could have imagined. Her body was bruised and battered, broken in more ways than one. She had been lying there for days, unable to move, too weak to call for help. The authorities immediately took her to the hospital, but Maria couldn't speak. The trauma was too much, both physically and mentally. As she lay unconscious in her hospital bed, her family and friends struggled to piece together what had happened. Was she attacked, or had she simply fallen? The police seemed to suggest an accident, but her family was not convinced. The Maria they knew was not someone to wander into danger. This wasn't just a simple fall. Something darker had happened. They just had to figure out what. As Maria's condition slowly stabilized, the questions grew louder. Her family couldn't accept the idea that this was just an accident. Maria was a smart, careful young woman. She wasn't someone who would simply wander into danger. Something didn't add up. The police, however, remained focused on the idea that it had been an unfortunate fall, possibly from an unsafe construction site. But her family felt there was more to the story. Maria's phone record showed no signs of distress during the time she was missing. No sudden calls for help, no text to anyone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Her social media had been wiped clean and her accounts locked. Everything she had shared was gone. That wasn't the Maria they knew. They began to suspect something far more sinister: human trafficking. And they weren't alone in their suspicions. As the investigation deepened, the authorities began to take the family's concerns seriously. Maria's disappearance was no longer being treated as just an accident. The police started looking into the possibility of human trafficking, especially given the circumstances of her recovery. Maria was starting to show signs of trauma that didn't match a simple fall. Her memory was fragmented. She couldn't recall most of what had happened in the 10 days she was missing. The doctors noted that she seemed to have been sedated or drugged during that time. Her body had been moved, as though someone had forced her to stay hidden, and she had been kept unconscious for a reason. this wasn't just about a fall, it was about control. As they dug deeper, they found more unsettling signs. Strange men appearing around the areas she was last seen, whispers of illegal activities in the city's darker corners. The pieces of Maria's story were starting to fall into place, but they painted a horrifying picture. As the police dug deeper into the human trafficking angle, they discovered that Maria wasn't the first young woman to go missing in Dubai under suspicious circumstances. The city, known for its luxury and wealth, also had its dark underbelly, hidden from the glittering surface. Maria had likely been targeted by a well-organized group that lured young women into the illusion of a glamorous lifestyle before trapping them. Witnesses who had been near the areas where Maria was last seen described seeing men who seemed out of place, offering mysterious opportunities to models and influencers. The police were now convinced that Maria had been drugged and sold to this underground network. But the question remained, why had she been left alone, broken and abandoned, rather than disappearing completely? Was there someone in the group who had a conscience? Or was there something else at play? As the investigation into Maria's ordeal continued, the police managed to trace some of the people who were likely involved in the trafficking ring. A series of undercover operations were set up, focusing on the shadowy corners of Dubai where the rich and powerful hid their darkest secrets. Maria's memory, still fragmented, began to offer more clues. She recalled being in a luxurious apartment with no windows, voices echoing around her, and faces she couldn't recognize. In those moments of panic and confusion, she had been given something, a drug, a sedative perhaps, to keep her compliant. The police discovered a pattern. Influencers like Maria were being targeted, brought into Dubai for high-profile events, only to be swept into the underground world once they were isolated and vulnerable. But Maria had been lucky. Somehow, despite everything, she had escaped. Yet, the authorities were still faced with the most troubling question: who had allowed her to escape, and why? As the investigation progressed, the authorities began to unravel a disturbing truth. Maria's escape wasn't as simple as it seemed. The more they dug into the trafficking ring, the more they discovered that some of the people involved were surprisingly well-placed in the very circles Maria had once moved in. There were whispers that certain influential figures, people with power, money, and connections, had been silently facilitating the trafficking operations, using their status to shield the illegal network. Maria, unknowingly, had been a pawn in a much larger game. Her family and friends were devastated to learn that the very world she had been so eager to become a part of was what had nearly destroyed her. But Maria's escape had shaken something in the network, revealing cracks they hadn't anticipated. As the authorities worked to bring down the traffickers, Maria's bravery became a symbol, not just of survival, but of a larger fight against a hidden darkness. As the authorities closed in on the powerful individuals behind the trafficking ring, Maria's role in exposing the network became undeniable. Despite the trauma she had endured, she had become a reluctant hero. Her testimony was key, though it was difficult for her to relive the moments she had been forced to forget. With each piece of information she provided, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. But the battle wasn't over. Even as police began making arrests, some of the people responsible for the trafficking ring remained elusive, hiding behind their wealth and influence. The more Maria revealed, the more she realized just how deep the corruption ran, not just in Dubai, but across borders. As she recovered physically, the mental scars lingered, and she grappled with the overwhelming weight of knowing the true extent of the world she had once dreamed of joining. She had been used, manipulated, but now she was fighting back. As the final pieces of the trafficking network were dismantled, the city of Dubai began to confront its darker reality. The authorities celebrated the successful arrests, but Maria's journey was far from over. Her bravery had exposed a hidden world, but the emotional scars she carried would take time to heal. She moved back to Ukraine, surrounded by the support of her family and friends, who had stood by her side through the darkest days. But even in her new life, the memories of the city that had once promised her everything haunted her. She struggled to understand why she had been chosen, why her dreams had been shattered in such a brutal way. But Maria's story wasn't just about survival. It was about resilience, the strength to speak out when the world wanted you to stay silent. And as she looked forward to rebuilding her life, she knew one thing for certain: the fight for justice would never end.